Let me tell you this. And this is something I don't think I would have ever said to anyone 15, 10, or even 5 years ago. The pursuit of truth is a fool's errand. The truth doesn't get you anything. It doesn't solve the problem of suffering. It doesn't provide a solution to living. If anything, the more of the truth you perceive, the more it gets in the way of every agenda or strategy you've ever developed to survive. Because the truth doesn't make sense. It's not meant for the mind to grasp it in any meaningful way. If anything, the closer you perceive the truth, the more confused the mind becomes. The more it begins to doubt its own strategies. And yes, from the point of view of a spiritual inquiry, you want that. You want to question your presumptions. You want to question your beliefs. But you have to understand why you have these beliefs. You have to understand why you have your illusions. You don't just have your illusions because you have carefully chosen your illusions over a lifetime. You have gone shopping at the illusion store every single day of your life and artfully picked one piece at a time, like you would at an arts and crafts store, and gradually constructed this tapestry that you call your life, which is really a tapestry of illusions. And you've done this because you've understood very, very early on in life that illusions are what help us survive in a world and in a society which is fundamentally illusory itself. Just like you don't go to the football game wearing a ballet outfit. Oh, this is good. And just like you don't go into a business meeting wearing a Halloween costume, illusions are the costumes. Illusions are the garb in which we need to dress ourselves and our lives in order to apply the grander illusion of society we're participating in. Damn thing is so crumbly. But the thing with truth perception is, once you begin, there's no real controlling it. It's like a one-way train or a runaway train. You have a choice to hop on, but once you do, you're kind of on for the ride, unless you get bumped off or manage to jump off somehow. But for the most part, you can control how far and how deep you're going to go in your truth perception once you start. So, while your motivation in the beginning might be to perceive through the illusion of our social realities, the social drama, the social characters, the social costumes, which we tend to call our personalities or our egos, that is in fact not the only illusion out there. It is merely the most surface level of illusion. Because when you begin questioning your social identity, you begin to question why you have your social identity, why you believe in your social identity, and why you have an emotional attachment to your social identity. Why you have such a strong sense of a Shiv. Why does Bob have such a strong sense of a Bob? Why does Jill have such a strong sense of a Jill, being a Jill? It's not just, clearly it doesn't just feel like a mask we just put on for a short period of time. It's something more adhesive to it. It's like the mask is stuck on and it's stuck on by something. What is that something that sticks? And we could say it's thoughts and beliefs and all that. And yes, that is another layer of the illusion. And we can question that. We can question our assumptions. We can question, well, you're just going to have to deal with me eating. You can question, why is it that I need to believe this is true? Is it really true? Is it really true that I'm Indian? Is it really true that I'm a man? Well, what is a man? What's the definition of a man? Is it merely a biological reality, or is there something to being a man that's more than a biological reality? Is there a social reality to it? Or what is the social component? What are the attributes of what make a man versus not a man, or versus a woman? And we could question all this. You see, that's the whole point of the truth, is to keep driving down deeper. And then we get to a point where we start to realize, hey, wait a second. All these things that I thought were true, where do they come from? They're actually baseless. They're hollow. When you really get down to the root of it, they're quite hollow. What is an Indian? What is India? Well, who called it that? Who decided where the borders are? And what about the place of birth and the culture surrounding it makes that who I am? And what is a man? Is it true that the attributes we socially ascribe to men are really of their nature? Or have we been sort of enculturated to manifest these attributes and suppress other attributes that are then assigned to women and typically thought of as female attributes? So we go through this whole process of questioning. And we eventually get to a point where we say, all right, all beliefs are fundamentally hollow. But there's an emotional component to it, and that's my feelings, my emotions, all of that. My anger, my love, my joy, my pain, my sorrow, my excitement, all of that emerges from somewhere. Well, are those real? See, we just can't stop. We can't get off the train once we're on it. Unless you get bumped off by no fault of yours, kind of stuck on the train. It's going where it's going to go. You're going along for the ride. None of this, by the way, is helping you whatsoever achieve your one strategy that every organism on this planet has, which is to just survive. No, now you're on a totally different tangent. But hey, that's the ride you're on. Anyways, so you start to question, well, are my emotions real? I feel them, but hey, wait a second. Where are they arising? They don't seem to be out there. Yeah, they seem to be triggered by certain things in the external environment, but there are these sensations in my body. They always seem to have some kind of thought component attached to it, or image component at the very least attached to it, or even sensory component. For example, there are certain smells that remind me of my childhood, and it just, the smell of for example, jasmine. The jasmine flower reminds me of my grandmother doing her prayers in the morning. And so today, if I smell the jasmine flower, just that will bring up a sense of nostalgia within me before the image of my grandmother doing her prayers even comes up. So there's clearly a sensory component to emotions. Just as there's an emotional content to thought. You see, everything links. So okay, well, there's a sensory component, but just because it's triggered sensorially, does that then mean my emotions are real? So you start investigating these things, you start to realize that, hey, in a sense, the more real than thoughts are, because they seem to have direct sensory interaction with the body as opposed to the thought, which kind of needs the emotion as an interface to interact with the body. Emotion has a much more direct link to the body. But most of us sense our emotions are, you guys will be happy I'm done eating. Ultimately, track to hormonal responses in our body. When I first saw my children being born, I was there, present with my wife, both occasions. There's a flood of emotion you feel when you first perceive your child, when you first see them. And that flood of emotion just continues onwards, from that point onwards. Before that, they're just an abstract idea in your head, which could also have an emotional component to it, but that's more the thought that you're attached to. But when you actually see the organism, when you actually see the person, the being, your child, there's an automatic, natural, organic response within, physiologically within the body. And that is a dump of oxytocin. Oxytocin is called the love hormone. And some anthropologists, what's the word I'm looking for? This is what happens after I eat, my brain slows down. Some anthropologists conjecture that human beings and other animals had to develop this oxytocin dump in their systems, especially within fathers, to prevent them from killing or eating their own children, right? Because otherwise, like a lion sees other cubs as just competition. The lion knows that one day this cub, another few years from now, will be possibly twice his size and will challenge him for leadership of the pride. But when he sees his own cubs, that's okay. He wants them to grow up and take over the pride. That's kind of the mindset. And so it's the oxytocin dump flooding his nervous system when he looks at his own cubs. That doesn't happen when he looks at other cubs. That helps him differentiate between which cubs he loves and which cubs he doesn't love, right? And that's at the very basic animalistic level. Within humans, it's obviously more developed. Part of that is because our thoughts interact and then further fan that flame of emotion within us. But when you start investigating emotions in this way, you begin to realize that, hey, wait a second, there's a hormonal component to every single emotion I have, whether that be bliss, whether that be joy or love, enthusiasm. So my phone died because I ran out of space. I had to delete some old videos in order to make this one. So continuing from where I left off. We're talking about emotions. We're talking about how positive emotions, but even the negative emotions, anger, sadness, fear, that's a big one, stress, anxiety. These are also linked to hormonal changes in the body, right? And so when you have a cortisol dump, that's a stress hormone, it alters the way you operate. Or if there's an adrenaline rush, that's a fear hormone. So when you start to investigate emotions themselves, you start to find that other than the hormonal correlate within the body, within the endocrine system, there is no reality to an emotion. There's an image component in the mind. There's a hormonal component in the brain and the body. Then there's a belief component that gives the sense of that the emotion, that sense of reality. So emotions themselves then seem illusory. But then it doesn't just end there, because then you start questioning the body itself and how it operates. Is our physical reality, the physical reality of the body, is that true? right? That runaway train hasn't stopped. It's not just going to stop at the emotion station, just like it didn't stop at the thought station or the society station. At each station, it just keeps powering through. It's a runaway train, right? There's nobody driving it. If there was, it would be rational, but it's not. Nothing about this whole process is rational at all. It defies all reason. We don't understand why it's even happening. It just is. And so similarly, when you start to look into the body and investigate the body, you begin to question, well, is the body even real? Is the organism actually an independent, unique, distinct organism? And the more you sit there and ponder, the more you sit there and look into it in a very sort of open way, not really necessarily questioning it intellectually, but really feeling the experience of the body and the experience of the environment, it gradually begins to dawn that this organism that we take ourselves to be is really not just part of everything else, but in a sense, there is no real separation between everything else. It's kind of like each finger has a specific function, has an independent reality, but are also extension of a single hand. So when you talk about a hand, you don't see it as 5 or 6 distinct parts. You see it as one entity. And then beyond that, when you look at the hand as part of an arm, you begin to realize that the hand doesn't have any separate existence outside of the arm. And then when you look at the arm as part of the body, you start to realize the arm doesn't have a separate existence outside of the body. And similarly, when you look at the body, at a certain point, you begin to realize the body doesn't have a separate existence outside of that of nature. And nature is one singular being, with each organism just being a single aspect of it, right? Again, none of this is ever going to help you do anything meaningful or purposeful with your life. It's not going to help you survive better. It's not going to help you become wealthier, build a retirement fund. Not unless you begin to take advantage of other people's ignorance, which is an option always available to people. But that, again, has nothing to do with truth. But then the runaway train doesn't just stop at the physical reality station either. It's just going to keep going. At a certain point, you begin to question, well, all right, so social narrative isn't real. Thoughts are not necessarily real. They're illusory. They're more real than the social narrative, but illusory compared to emotions. Emotions are more real than thoughts, but then emotions are illusory compared to the physical body, which has a more sort of biological reality to it. But then, hold on a second. The biological, physical body itself is illusory when compared to the grander reality of that, the natural environment, because we start to see it's actually not separate from it, it's one. But then the train keeps going. And then you get to a point where you start to realize, well, physical reality, what if it's an illusion? What if matter, time, space, the very fabric of reality, is a construct? And this is something we're already, with quantum mechanics and physics and quantum theory, have already revealed. At a certain level, the universe is mostly space and particles. And even that reality is not really concrete in the sense that there appears to be a dualistic nature to it. There's a wave nature and a particle nature and all of that. I'm not going to sit here and pontificate on that part. I'm not a quantum physicist, but it introduces enough doubt into the equation for us to then conclude that, hey, perhaps, just perhaps, physical reality itself is not reality. Well, then what is? All right, we can say, well, the quantum world is. The quantum world is reality. But it doesn't just end there either. Because then the question becomes of, oh, what does the quantum world emerge from? Where does the whole thing come from? Where do particles come from? Where do waves come from? From what does it emerge? Right? And the point is, eventually, you never really land on what is real. You just end up with everything being an illusion. It's like the story of the princess and the pea. I'm not sure if you heard it, but it's a fairy tale that kids hear where there's a princess who she's out riding one night and she's caught in a storm and ends up seeking shelter in another castle, and she's all wet and disheveled. And when the castle gate opens and, she's asked who she is, she says she's a princess, and they don't believe her. And so the queen decides to test if she really is a princess. And she invites her in. She says, all right, we've prepared your room for you. And in the bedroom, she stacks something like 50 or 100 mattresses, one on top of the other. And right at the base of the very most bottom mattress, she puts a little pea in there and stacks 100 mattresses on top and asks the princess to sleep on top. And so the princess sleeps there that night. And then the next morning, the queen asks her, well, how did you sleep? The princess goes, well, thank you very much for your hospitality and all that, but I didn't sleep very well. There's something poking me in my back the entire night. So, and the queen says, oh, well, you must be a real princess because you're such a delicate flower. But that's essentially the human condition, isn't it? There's something poking us in the back, constantly reminding us that there's something to look at, but we don't know what it is. There's a pea, presumably. There's this pea and the 100 layers of illusion that we're living in. We'll never see the pea. We'll never see the pea. We'll never know what it is. But it constantly reminds us to look towards it, to acknowledge its existence. Right? So, the essence of everything that I'm talking about today is essentially just to say, seeking truth is to set yourself up for failure. You'll never find the truth. And the very most you can find is the layers of illusion you're kind of resting under or on top of, to be more accurate. Right? Just like the princess is sleeping on 100 mattresses. Your existence is based upon 100 concentric layers of reality, of illusion, not reality. 100 consecutive layers of illusion stacked on top of each other, layer by layer, to create this grand singular illusion of what we call life. And most people develop a certain life strategy and then they just follow through because they're not sitting trying to figure out what is true. Because instinctively, perhaps, I don't know, I'm speculating here, instinctively perhaps they know there's no way to really know what is ever true. All you can ever truly find out is what is false. But how does finding out what is false serve you? How does it serve your agenda as an organism to survive? It doesn't. It actually places an obstacle in that agenda. It diverts your attention, your awareness from the game, the social game, the natural game, the animalistic game of surviving and keeping this body alive and well and breathing to the end of its days. It diverts your attention away from that on this quest to find what is true. But we never will know what is true. Right? We'll only ever perceive what is false. There's a value to that as well. but it just doesn't serve the organism very well. There's some therapeutic benefits to realizing that your emotions are illusory if they have become problematic for you to manage. Not everybody's emotions are problematic for them to manage. Those who have a good handle on their emotional states, are quite comfortable with them, don't need to see that their emotions are illusory. It's for those for whom emotions have become, a torment, a torture, an everyday nightmare, that it then benefits to see emotions as illusory. Similarly, it doesn't benefit everyone to see thoughts as illusory. There's some people who are very, very, very comfortable in their belief systems. It makes them happy, it gives them a sense of community, it creates a sense of family and belonging, and they live out their entire lives in that state, quite blissfully ignorant to how their thoughts and beliefs are illusory. And as far as I'm concerned, all the power to them. There's no reason for them to question whether their thoughts and beliefs are illusory. The only time one really begins to question that is if one finds that one's belief systems and thoughts are problematic, or not working out, or something else is bothering them. It's typically from a place of deep unrest, dissatisfaction, that we begin to question these things. And then, yes, there might be some merit to questioning these things. But if there is no dissatisfaction, then I see no point to it. Similarly with questioning your social reality. If one is in a social position that benefits them, benefits their families, benefits their lifestyle, and they are engaged, successful, and happy doing what they're doing, whatever it is they're doing, and it does not seem to impact them in an overly negative way in the long run, then what reason do they have to question it? And why should they? The only reason to question one's social reality is if one's social reality is just not working out for you, right? If you feel like a misfit in society, you're not able to fit in, you're not able to peg yourself into a position where you feel supported and validated and successful. So it's often from a position in which our own survival strategies are failing that we then begin to seek the truth, because it's kind of like the disgruntled employee in the organization. They're the best ones at pointing out everything that's wrong with the organization. And often those are flaws in the organization, but they're good at pointing it out precisely because they're motivated to point them out, because they're not happy in that organization. They don't feel like they're taken care of. Whereas the happy employees will often not really point out the flaws, even if they see them. And they're not really interested because they're happy with their setup. So fundamentally, we're all motivated by survival, need to survive. And when we can survive, or when survival itself becomes a torment and a torture, and our day-to-day living becomes unbearable to us, that's when we begin to seek truth. That's how it was for me when I began my search for the truth. As a child, I was unhappy, deeply unsure of who I was, what my place in society was, all of that. Do I regret going on this, long spiritual journey of seeking and all of that for decades? Do I regret any of that? Absolutely not. But at the same time, I don't think that journey is essential for everybody to take. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. We don't have a baseline reality from which to judge. Every judgment we can make can only be made from some assumption we've made about reality. We don't really know what is good to do or what is not good to do, whether one should follow a spiritual path, whether one shouldn't, whether one should investigate into themselves, or one should only focus on the survival game. We don't know what's good or what's not good, what one ought to do. We have no idea because there's no baseline reality any of us is operating from. Even those people who say, oh, everything is non-dual and this reality is a non-duality and there is no true self. All of that is just another level of illusion at the end of the day, because it's all illusion all the way down. And like I said, all we can do is just peel away another layer of illusion, but we cannot see what is real. We have no contact with reality. So everything that we ever say about life is just from another level of illusion. Somebody you meet on the street might be talking from the level of being, caught up in the social level of illusion. Somebody else may be caught up in the abstract thought level of illusion. Somebody else might be in the emotional level of illusion. Somebody else might be in the biological level of illusion, physical level, even the non-dual level. They're all different levels of illusion. Relative to each other, they have different perspectives and different validity. But ultimately, all of them are illusory. So we have no basis by which to truly, truly ever say something is right and something is wrong, something is true and something is false. It's simply relative. Relative to thought, the thought level and the abstract level, the social reality seems illusory. Relative to the emotional level, the thought and belief level seems illusory. Relative to the physical level, the emotional reality seems illusory. Relative to the natural level, the level of the natural world, the existence of an individual organism and a sense of self attached to that organism seems illusory. Relative to the physical level and the quantum level, the physical world and the natural world seem illusory. But it can just go on. And it does go on. And there's nowhere that it ever lands that we know of. So my only definition for the word reality is to simply call it the sum total of all our illusions. Because at least when you know it's all an illusion, then you're free to play with the illusions as you choose. Then whether I imagine myself to be a separate self, or I imagine my emotions to be real, or imagine this character named Shiv doing A, B, and C every day is actually happening. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. It's my choice to choose these illusions, because illusions are all I have. That's all I have to play with. They're my toys, and I'm a child, and I'm just going to play. And there's no right way to play.